Welcome, folks, to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley here with Kedric Prince, Brad Sturdy. We are going to talk today about the top 5 small forwards in our memory as Illini fans. Brad, anything as we were, trying to rank these, did anything come out that kind of surprised you, or you're like, oh, I never thought of that.
Well, I think it's tough because you look at careers or seasons, and that makes it more difficult to figure out if it's one season, whether it's an entire career. And then the other part is some guys may have played the small forward position, but really not been a small forward. So,
Right.
or you have small forwards who didn't play the small forward position and they played the power forward position. And I think we'll get to that when we talk about centers and power forwards too down the road. A lot of guys played multiple spots. So it was tough. And I think this was a difficult position. After the top two, I think this was a difficult thing. Top two are pretty easy, in my opinion.
Yep. Ked?
For me, it's I guess just seeing what we all pick. I guess because we did the point guard, we did the shooting guard, but right now, I guess to me the most interesting thing, when I filled this out, immediately the first thing I thought of was I knew who my number one was. Then I started thinking, I wonder who they're gonna pick because I will tell you, it's when people see the list, I think that I'm not seeing two of them. I think once, like Brad mentioned, once you get to three, especially four and five, it's tough, it's debatable, and I think the fans who are going to join us, if we miss on some guys and swing and miss, they're going to let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, they tend to do that, don't they?
Mm.
Yeah, this will be a fun one because I think we had some guys, and again, we're still going to see some pretty good players, in the power forward and the center positions. And I'm thinking we'll see, Illini guy favorite Marcus Griffin may show up on some lists, and of course we've had Eddie Johnson on. Kenny Battle still hasn't been on there yet. So there's a lot of fantastic players that we haven't even scratched the surface on. And I also believe if we take the guys who finished number 2 and played them against the guys who are number 1, I'm not certain you know who the winner would be. So I think it's a pretty talented group of people. So let's get into this and kind of talk a little bit about what we've got. And of course, let's start off with number 5. See what we can get started here. All right. Brad, how did you get Marcus Damask, a 1-year wonder, on your top 5 list?
I think the success of the team. I thought Damask had some of the most dominant games. The game in Madison Square Garden comes to mind. Triple double in the NCAA tournament. He had a great season. Maybe it's recency bias, but they put him up there, and the team made the Elite Eight. So I think that gives you. I think that puts him in a different era. I see when I look at other lists, this first time I'm seeing some of these. See Luther Head, and you've got Marcus Damask as well. I thought he was probably the second. He was the second best player on an Elite Eight team, so I think that makes him kind of. And again, this goes back to the 1 year versus 4 years. Probably that 1 year he's better than maybe some guys ahead of him, but at the same time, I thought the maybe the career means more than just a single year a little bit.
Yep. Now, Ked, you had Rayvonte Rice, who, man, he statistically had a couple really good years for Illinois after transferring in from Drake. He's one of those guys. I think he and Malcolm Hill are two guys who, if they had been on better Illini teams, might be remembered a little more than they are.
From a personal standpoint with Rayvonte, I'll start with that. When my son was in high school, he played against some of the best players in the state of Illinois. He just did. And I'll never forget, they were playing in the State Farm Classic in State Farm. And I was kind of frustrated watching my son play because he could score. It didn't matter. He was a 20-point career game scorer. And when it was over, he was like, "Dad, I've never in my life had a guy guard me like that." He said, "I just threw up shots and I had my eyes closed because I was hoping they would go in." Because He was physical. We talked about this when I went over the list, and I remember he said he was like 4 for 17. But my point is, Ray was physical. He should have been at Illinois or not a mid-major when he left high school. Ray made my list because he was, like you mentioned, Mike, he put up some great numbers. He was a forgotten player because he was on a really average team. I think for the most part, the fans remember that shot against Missouri. I didn't put him on it just because of one shot. But I just think he was an underrated player who only got 2 years. But I can only imagine if he was playing on a good team and had a chance to advance and doing the tournament, and he's still playing. I think he's still playing right now. But just knowing how big and physical he could shoot, he could defend, he had a mid-range game, he could finish around the basket. I just think he's underrated in terms of Illinois basketball because his team didn't do well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Of course, Larry had Luther Head, who you talk about it probably would be a there's not a lot of difference between a 2 and a 3 and a wing, so to speak, but many people might consider him more of a 2 than a 3. But Luther obviously on the most successful Illini team of all time. I had Marcus Domask. I still would go back to watching him work on ball handling before a game with under Tim Anderson's watchful eye. And you could see already when you got up close, Ked, you and I were right there on the sideline talking to Coach Alexander. And man, Marcus Domask was a big dude. And I've often thought that if the Dallas Cowboys had any brains, they would have called up Marcus and see if he wanted to play tight end for him because he had the body for it. And we found out that year that he also had the mindset for it. And that I think was one of the things when a guy moves up from a smaller, just like Rayvonte Rice, those two came up from smaller levels. And yet when they played, they were literally guys who could go up there and get into it with anybody in terms of going head to head and wanting to be physical. So I thought he was good. Obviously, one season, but boy, that was an incredible season. Now we go to number 4, and here we have. So, Brad, talk about the case for Malcolm Hill, who I think may be one of the most underrated Illini of all time.
Yeah, Malcolm Hill. What John Gross used to call him? He's the Swiss Army knife, or the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. So yeah, he did a little bit of everything. I think he played point guard. He played everything from 1 to 4. This time in Illinois, but he probably slots as a 3. I think he's just a really good player. Mike's list, honestly, that was one that I probably was. Andy Kaufman's an interesting one for you because he was such a great scorer and hit some big shots and different things. Yeah, it's just so that was an intriguing one. But I like Malcolm. I think Malcolm did a little bit of everything. I think he's underrated just because the teams he had were never good enough to make the NCAA tournament, and it's a shame. I really wish he would have played in the NCAA tournament and had a chance to kind of showcase himself a little bit there.
My thing with why I picked Marcus Domask is this. I remember when Illinois brought him on campus. People can say what they want. If you're being honest with yourself, nobody really cared about Marcus Domask, and they thought, okay, here's another player from Southern Illinois, another low major player. To be fair, I kind of thought it a little bit, and I did. And then I had a conversation with one person on the staff, and they made a comment to me. They were like, look, this kid's going to surprise some people. And I don't know if it was coaches talking. I had no idea. But they're like, this kid is different. We talked about, you look at all the video footage, he had a funky shot, and they talked about how good of a three-point shooter he was. But the reason why Marcus Domask made my top 5, one year or not, when you look at all the top single-season scorers in Illinois history, I don't know if you were born in the 30s or 50s, 60s, and 70s. I don't know when you were born, but if you look up the most successful seasons in Illinois basketball history, Marcus Domask ranks 10th. He's actually tied with Malcolm Hill with 603 points. That's how good he was. He was that good to where he scored 603 points And Brad mentioned the number one scorer in the school history was Terrence Shannon Jr. with 736, and they were both on the same team. So Marcus was special. There was a lot of games a lot of people liked. I remember him at Wisconsin. I think at Illinois his senior year, last year, if he didn't play at Wisconsin, they lose. He was just a tough kid. For a kid to only play 1 year in mid-major basketball, he came into the Big Ten and fit in right away. So I just think he was special. I really liked him. And, there was some booty ball invented by, I forget the Penn State player. But when you think of booty ball, I don't care. It's him. I mean, that should be his nickname for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and I picked Andy Kaufman because I actually thought he was kind of Marcus Domask on offense before Marcus Domask because he could do anything. He could play inside, he could play outside, very similar. And people forget that Kaufman's in that rare group of guys who scored over 20 points a game. He averaged 21 in his junior year. Obviously, then he had the injury and then had to come back for his senior year and still ended up at 17 a game. Now, Andy didn't always have the greatest ability to judge whether you should shoot or not, but I thought when it came to scoring,
yes, he did, Mike. It was always to shoot.
To shoot or not to shoot.
There is no question. To shoot or not shoot, there is no question.
Yeah, it would be to shoot or shoot.
Hey, there's an old couple quotes. If it feels like leather, shoot it. So that was Andy Kaufman. Or if you're on, keep shooting. If you're off, shoot until you're on. So
I'll tell you, I want to make a comment about Andy. I remember last week when we got off the air, I immediately started thinking about three, and I mentioned Andy to Mike, and I tell you, I feel bad about leaving him off my list. Now seeing him on Mike, and I did mention him, and I'm going to tell you why I feel bad, and I'm going to admit a mistake. That kid had 660 points in one season, man. I'm telling you. A lot of people didn't like him because he was different. I understand. I get it, and he was. I was a ball hog. I'm not gonna lie to you, but he was different. He made me look like I never want to shoot a basketball. But I mean, seriously. But and I feel bad about leaving him off my list. I'm glad this is a podcast, and I don't have to answer to somebody who's probably going to ask me, "No, well, who would you take off?" But I do think Andy probably should have been on my list. He was different, but he could score, man.
Yeah, he was. Do you remember? You know what? Obviously everybody remembers the shot against Iowa, right?
Right.
But how about wasn't it Andy Kaufman and was it Vaughn McDade in the Illini Classic, and they both put up 40
points,
40 points each in that Illini Wisconsin. Was it Wisconsin Milwaukee that he played for? McDade, is that it?
I think so.
I can't remember, man. It's been a long time, but yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, Kaufman was fun, and him and Malcolm Hill. You put them 4 years in the past or 4 years in the future, maybe, and they might have a totally different legacy. A few years removed, and you feel for guys who got here at the wrong time. But boy, old Andy, man, when he was on, he was fun to watch. So I had to put him there. I know I kind of pulled one out of the rabbit's hat when I did Doug Altenberger last week. So I like to throw a guy out here or there that people go, "What the heck?" Now at number 3, now all of a sudden we're starting to cook with fire, where people are getting a little bit more agreeable, amenable amongst one another. Now you had Luther Head over Malcolm Hill, Brad. I did not. So I'm looking at that, and that one kind of surprised me.
37-2. It's just, he was the leading scorer on a team that went 37-2. To me, that just, he was, and here's the thing, he's not a 3.
Right.
That's what I was talking about when we started. Like, he's not a 3, but he played the 3 because D and Darren were at the 1 and 2, the 3-guard lineup, the 3-headed monster. I just thought he was just such a great, and he showed that toughness. He could defeat, his defense was fantastic as well. He guarded bigger guys. He was able to, hold his own despite being, let's be honest, Luther's about 6'2".
Yeah.
And I listed him at 6'3". He wasn't quite that tall, but he was freakishly athletic. He shot the ball. He became a great shooter. which is something he wasn't known for in high school. He's known for throwing it off the backboard in a game and catching it and dunking it in high school. So, but yeah, he just became such a fantastic all-around player, which is a testament to his hard work and great development by the coaching staff with Luther Head. So that's why I have him here. You could argue Malcolm Hill ahead of him maybe, but it's just kind of that when you're on a team that went 37-2, victor goes the spoils, right?
For me, I guess I'm going to go back to when Luther Head when he committed to Illinois. If there was two players that I can think of that just were not highly recruited coming out of high school in Illinois basketball history, I would say it'd be Kendall Gill and Luther Head. Or maybe you shouldn't say Holly Tyler, but they were just string bean guys that just developed into good players. And I think Luther Head is a cheat sheet because he is a two guard, and I was able to put him down as a three because after we did this, I told you guys I have a lot of videotapes. So I went back and I watched the games as much as people do not want to admit it. And that's fine. I mean, I have our own opinions. I get it. Luther did play most of the three. He just did. Because you knew on that team, probably 60% of the time, 70% of the time, Darren Williams had the ball in his hand. And if Darren was on the bench, it was D, then Luther went to the two. Because D was a shooting guard, but we know how good he could shoot. So I think he had a successful career at, 6'2", 6'3", and 6'3", stretching it. I know it's about Illinois history, but he did go to the NBA. He played in the NBA. He wasn't just a guy that you took a picture and said, okay, I got a jersey and I got drafted in the 15th round. He actually, played in the NBA. And I think what stinks about Luther is that he, on that team, Brad mentioned he was the leading scorer on that team. Nobody talks about him. It's always D. Darren or James Augustine. People just forget about him. I mean, they'll bring his name up. They'll bring the three-headed monster up. And then Luther kind of vanished off the face of the earth. So, maybe it's easy to forget about him. But on the court, he was just tough. And I remember that last championship game. I mean, he just couldn't, when they lost North Carolina, he couldn't buy a bucket. And he made himself into a good shooter. That's why I compared him to Kendall Gill. Because neither one of those two guys were great shooters when they came to Illinois, and they became excellent shooters.
Yeah, I had Malcolm Hill partly so high up because it's not like he wasn't a talented guy, but he did not have the quick twitch that Luther had. I don't know that he had the strength that Marcus Domask had. And he certainly didn't have anybody on the team that everybody else, the other teams were going, we got to stop this guy. It was all Malcolm, and somehow Malcolm got his points and performed despite, not being, especially when you look at the top two guys we're going to rank here, just, he didn't have that type of athleticism. So I did that. Now there was one guy that I left off before we get into the top ones here. I struggled and I didn't put Mark Smith on here, and I was really tempted to put him on because he had a heck of a career for the Illini. Now we know his NBA career was derailed by some of the temptations that hit a lot of people. But how did you guys think about Mark Smith and what he did for the Illini? Of course, people remember I get a lot of people who ask me about Eddie Johnson saying that Mark Smith was the one player who was better than him. How did you guys, feel about not having him on there? I could let Brad go first.
I was actually a huge Mark Smith fan.
Oh gosh, yes.
I mean, I thought he was great. I thought he was a tremendous player. I have his little Arby's card from back in the day. So Mark Smith's Arby's card, still have it. So no, I thought he was great. For me, he was right at the end of this list again. I thought there were, he would have been right. He and Ray Rice would have been the next two for me on my top 7. So he's just off the list. If you put Mark Smith or I think Ked put Rayvante Rice, I wouldn't argue with that. I think both those guys are really good players. Andy Kaufman would have been there too, but I didn't even think about Andy Kaufman. That goes to show you some teams are more memorable than others.
Yeah.
This is a cop out, but you only get 5. You give us 5 spots, and somebody had to be left off. And Mike, Brad just mentioned, I mentioned I felt bad about leaving Andy Kaufman off. Yes, Mark Smith could have. If you would have said top 6, top 8, and I don't want you to do that because it takes the fun out, because it makes it tough for us to think, he would have made the list. Like you said, Eddie Johnson talked about, how good of a player he was and what he meant to Illinois. And a lot of it is just, I hate to say it, it's tough because some of these guys, just when you look at the history of the school and what they've done, it's hard to leave off. We can make a case for it. Like I just mentioned to you, you can make a case for Andy Kaufman. Malcolm Hill's a guy that I think a lot of people probably forgot about until they've seen him on all these lists.
Yep. Before we get into the top 2, let's take a little break here and get a word from our friends at Busey Bank.
This is the run my own business dream. This is the college is paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
So now we're coming down to the final 2, and I got to be honest with you. I got to think that there's nobody who, Illini fans are probably curious who we're going to put number 1 and who we're going to put number 2. And the first thing I will warn you about is Terrence Shannon Jr. we ranked as a 2, so you don't have to worry about him in this ranking. And I will go and kind of see where we ended up. And we had 3 votes for Eddie Johnson at number 2. And Eddie was probably, for me, there were 3 players that I still go back and I look at as my best Illini players, and Eddie and Derek Harper are 2 of the 3, and we'll see the third one come up here in a minute. Brad, Eddie versus another Mr. Anderson. That's quite a choice. How did you try to divide and cut the baby in half?
It was tough. It's very difficult. I'll be honest with you. When Eddie Johnson was playing, I was like 10, 9, so my memory isn't as good of him as it was when as it was with Nick Anderson playing. So maybe that was part of it. I just thought that Nick Anderson was, in my opinion, physically, there were times when Nick Anderson was unstoppable. I thought he might have been, in my opinion, I think he's probably, as an Illinois player, he was arguably the most dominant player at times. I don't think anybody, we could argue maybe at times Kofi was, but Nick Anderson could do it, create his own, and I thought he was just great. And so I would put him slightly above Eddie, but if you picked Eddie Johnson, I'm not going to argue with that.
If I have Eddie on the Illini again, he's going to give me a lot of grief over this.
To be number 2 of all time in small forwards, and to be a clear number 2, like I think these 2 guys were head and shoulders above everybody else. I don't think that's really the denigration of anyone.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I just thought Nick Anderson was so dominant. I just thought his way he was able to do things was just so much, just had a way about him. Obviously, both guys hit 2 of the biggest shots in Illinois history. The Michigan State and Indiana shots were just fantastic. So I think either way, it's pretty good. So I don't think you can really, like I say, you can't go wrong either way. I just have Nick just slightly higher.
Mike, I'm going to tell you, if Eddie is mad or don't like it, he's definitely going to let us know.
Eddie is not shy, is he?
Nope. He will tell you what he is thinking. A great career, over 600 points in one season. I use that, cliche with a lot of my guys. Obviously, I say I'm big in the scoring, but he had a great career, and I remember, like Brad said, we're not old, but him being young and the Michigan State shot. I wish there was better footage of that. As a matter of fact, I'm not for sure. I think there was a national NCAA tournament commercial that they used that on. Maybe it was Fox or CBS or somebody, but I remember that shot that they used or for some big commercial that they had during the tournament this year. That's how big of a shot that was. And but his career was great. he played at Illinois basketball. To me, why I have a number 2 is he had a great career. But when Illinois basketball was just nobody, they were struggling for years, and it was the 70s. But he just was really, really a consistent player and tall. And he's just a really, really good wing. And for the people who didn't see him play, you're not going to get a lot of good video footage of him if you're really, really young. As far as old timers here, we know how good of a player he was, and that's why you see him on 3 of the list here, because he was that good of a player. And it's hard to argue. I mean, like, it couldn't, I'm sure when we see Larry's list, we all know what it's going to be, but, with the 3 of us, we obviously can see how good of a player he is too, and how dominant he was at Illinois and what he meant to the program.
Yeah, and Eddie and I went head to head on the basketball court. My dad and I were at Impey Building. I was probably in 7th or 8th grade, and we were down at one end on a court, and several Illini basketball players were at the other end of the court. So they said, "You guys want to run with us?" So one team got my dad, and the other team got me. I got the ball against Eddie, and I decided for some reason to do a power layup against him. And going off of both feet as a 7th grader, there was that embarrassing moment when he had the ball like this, that I was hanging in the air from the blocked shot that he had. Eddie doesn't remember that, but I do.
You better.
And so, yeah, but I will tell you, I had a chance to play against Nick on the courts at MP Building as well. And he played with an intensity that was high, just like Eddie did. But I tell you, this was probably the hardest. I thought choosing between Terrence Shannon Jr. and Kendall Gill was tough. And again, trying to figure out the top point guard, Derek Harper, Darren Williams for me was tough. But I don't know if there would be anyone tougher for me than Nick Anderson versus Eddie Johnson. 2 of my favorite players, 2 of the best players, and guys with whom, if they had chose to go to school somewhere else, the Fighting Illini would have had a much different history. I love those 2 players. So then number 1, Brad, you got Nick up at the top. I can't argue with you. Ked can't argue with you. Larry probably was like us, very much torn between those 2. But give us, for these people who haven't seen Anderson, I think talk about his athleticism, talk about how he ranks. How does he compare against a guy like Terrence Shannon that some of the younger fans are more familiar with?
He wasn't. No one's as fast with the ball as Terrence Shannon. I mean, he get the ball go downhill, but
maybe D.
Yeah, D Brown. I would assume him really fast. Maybe, but for his size, Terrence was insane. But I think the difference between Nick is he was explosive off 2 feet. He could turn and jump over you and shoot it without even quick. He got off the floor so quick too. The only downside for Nick in his career was probably that he didn't block out one time. And that's probably it. I mean, that's the negative you can have with him. He could shoot the ball from distance. He could put it on the deck. He could hit pull-up jumpers. He could go up over guys and score up over guys like Purvis Ellison. You remember in the NCAA tournament? And
Yep.
I mean, he was such a great dominant player. I mean, that's why that team was so great. I mean, they had him, and they had Kenny Battle, they had Kendall Gill, they had Steve Bardo, Lowell Hamilton. Just Marcus Liberty coming off the bench, who had played in the NBA. Larry Smith coming off the bench. I mean, just what a great team that was. And I thought Nick was the best player on that team that season.
This is going to be fun for me to talk about because, to me, I think when you talk Illinois basketball, when you talk about the top 4 players that ever played basketball there, top 4, I don't care about the All-American list. I don't care about how many points you scored in the season. This cat was unbelievable. In today's term, the younger generation uses the word dog. It means how tough he is. Nick Anderson was a wolf. He was outstanding. And here's why he was so special. I know I don't want to make anybody mad 2005 team and, my boy Griff's team. But when you look at 1989, that season, that was probably the best basketball season in the history of Big Ten basketball. I remember talking to Kenny Battle once, and he mentioned to me, he said, Kedric, think about this. Every team you played against, Michigan had 2 or 3 guys that was drafted in the first round. Minnesota, I mean, every team, Indiana, Jay Edwards, every team, Iowa, B.J. Armstrong, Eddie Horton. That was the best single year in Illinois basketball. And if you ask any player, I've talked to Eddie Horton before, Kevin Gamble, they will all tell you the toughest guy they ever had to, well, one of the toughest guys they ever had to play against was Nick Anderson. Because Brad Wright is right. His leaping ability, I don't know, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", but he was built like a brick and he could literally shoot over the top of people. He had to master shooting the ball differently because he outjumped everybody. And he was quick. And his athleticism back then is what made him special. I can say to you, when you go talk about the all-time great basketball players in the Big Ten and in the history, it's him. And I know this is college basketball. When you look at his NBA career, I think the best player to play basketball was Michael Jordan. We can talk about LeBron James one other day, I guess, when I'm 6 feet under. But there was games where I'm going to tell you, Nick Anderson made it tough for Michael Jordan. He guarded him, and he made life hell for him. Nick was underrated. I think he only played 3 years. He may have been a Prop 48. I think that was the rule back in the day. But he
was a Prop 48.
Guys, he was just different. I'll tell you what, Illinois fans, there's some YouTube videos of that Fighting Illini team, and you go back and you're going to see highlights from about 3 people on that team, and I'm going to tell you, 40% of them is going to be Nick. Great career. Illinois was very lucky to get him at the time when Jimmy Collins was there. But boy, you talk about a kid from Simeon, one of the all-time greats. I just can't say enough about him.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, he could have been joined by his buddy Ben Wilson with a little bit of different fortune, and oh my goodness, that Illinois team probably would have won a national title although Ben might not have been there in 1989. He probably would have went pro by then. But Nick was incredible. I consider him to be, of our lifetime, probably the best basketball player to play at Illinois. Notice I didn't say most dominant, because then I think I just think then you go to the King Kofi. But Nick was amazing. The shot at Indiana, Brad brought up earlier. Nathan is talking about it on the YouTube comments. I mean, was that a night that you were at home screaming at your TV when he did that? Because that was so incredible. And anytime you could beat Bobby Knight.
Mike, think about that for a second, what we just talked about. If you look at that shot, most people are pushing it, throwing it. He shot that shot like it was a 15-foot free throw. He was that strong of a player. You go back, and he shot it, caught it in rhythm. That's how strong of a player he was. Didn't change any of his mechanics. He made it like it was like he was supposed to do it. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm telling you, that tells you what kind of athlete. Nobody, I've not seen people shoot off one leg, they throw it up, they shoot it in the chest. He literally shot that like he was shooting a regular 15-foot shot. That's how good of a player he was.
Yeah. I love Nick Anderson. So this time, finally, we don't have a tie for number 1 when we do our rankings. It was Nick Anderson, Eddie Johnson, and good for Malcolm. You know, he was on a team that didn't necessarily win a lot, but he made a good enough impression and was I mean, you have to wonder what kind of dark ages would it have been if Malcolm Hill hadn't come to Illinois. How bad could those years have been?
Could have been even bleaker.
Yes,
even more bleak. Whatever.
He turned out to be a lot better than what I thought he was going to be. I have to be truthful.
So I was a big Malcolm Hill fan, as you guys remember.
Yeah, I do actually remember that.
I thought he was really good. I got to watch him a lot in AAU. It was really the day, interestingly enough. So I think it was the day it was announced that the day after it was announced Bruce Weber was let go at Illinois. Malcolm was signed with Illinois at that time, and he was committed to Illinois at that time. And I was down in an AAU tournament, and I actually in St. Louis, and he was actually playing, and I got to talk to him the day after. So obviously, just I thought he was just fantastic. Carried himself extremely well. I thought he's just really happy for him. the career he's been able to put together as well. So, interestingly enough, another guy that speaking of Malcolm Hill, you know who the other guy who on those teams who was just a fantastic player and ended up being a good NBA player even, and we've never, I don't think we've mentioned him one time just because of the way it ended at Illinois was Kendrick
Probably
Nunn.
Kendrick Nunn, yeah.
No,
Yeah, I mean,
did I not put him on my list?
I don't think so.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the highest paid
I
guys
know
in
why.
Europe.
I know why.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
anyway, so yeah,
Kendrick was
those two
another
guys
one.
came in together in that 2013 class. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
was
was
good. I mean, and you know what? And you're right. And I don't. Kendrick's athleticism pro career didn't surprise me. Malcolm, he did get a stint in the NBA. I remember he played with the Bulls. I actually played with Io DeSumo for a small stretch. I just didn't think he was athletic enough, and he was one of those guys that was just like kind of like Andy Kaufman. They were just gifted scorers, And Malcolm had a really funny shot. I don't know how his shot went in because his hand was always on top of the basketball. The thing they tell you not to do, he did, and then he ended up being one of the top scorers in school history. So it's just really weird how it all worked out for him. But I'm just happy to see him being on the list. Him and Eddie Johnson both. I don't want to say I'm surprised, but I am. I will say this: seeing Malcolm at 3, when you look at all the forwards that played at Illinois, seeing him at 3 is kind of special, I guess.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun to get Malcolm on and kind of talk a little bit with him because he was a guy, like I said, didn't have the team around him. Eddie, of course, had to kind of build the team around him as well. But, Nick had a powerhouse. Luther had a powerhouse. Marcus, pretty good team around him. And Malcolm, not so much. And so I thought it was a heck of accomplishment for him. Now, next week, we go to the power forward position.
Mike, before you answer that, can I comment about one of our guys? Mark made a comment. Mark, I want you to understand, and I don't know how old you are. Unfortunately, and you can argue this if you want, Kenny Battle did not make that list because I'm going to tell you how it went. This is small forward and wings. Steve Barter was the point guard on that team. Kendall Gill was a 2 guard on that team. Nick Anderson was a 3-man on that team. Kenny Battle was the 4-man, and the 5 of Lowell Hamilton. There's a reason he's not on this list. I can tell you right now.
Because he's going to be on the next list.
Yes, and I think he won't be surprised where he's listed at. So on that team, he really was. And it's hard to fathom that because if you think about it, he was 6'6". That's all. And he played power forward.
Well,
the whole team was small. They were all about the same size. Lowell was a little bit taller. But that's why he didn't make the list, Mark. Sorry. And Brian Cook. Sorry.
Yeah, Brian Cook, obviously, power forward. Where do we put Dion? Do we put him at center or power forward?
Dion played center, but I think the year they had my big man, Sonny Clark, he played some 5. Dion was a 5. There's no way we can't. He was. I mean, you look at his teams, who else was beside him unless I'm missing somebody other than they have the junior college players.
And, of course, let's not forget Ken Norman.
Yes, another 4. I know.
He was spectacular.
Ephraim Winters.
Ephraim, one of my favorites. Gosh, I love that. And Marcus is already, he's putting in some thoughts there.
Griff, you was a 5, baby. We know what's up with you, man. Oh, see, and exactly, Griff, he's right. Dion was a center. I tell you, he was.
There's Marcus. Power forward center will be interesting, dude. He's coming at us. He's coming at us. We're gonna have him on the next show after that.
Marcus is still in shape. Marcus is still in shape, and he is big. So we're gonna have to give him some points here.
Yeah, but you know what though? Was he? Well, I know he's listening obviously because he just commented. Because Cookie was the 4. Griff was the big fella in the post because he's always giving us that good feedback about the post play. So Griff is going to be a 5 guy. We can't. So right away, we know we can't throw him in a spot.
Hey, do you know who had the best?
Griff. Is Griff better than Brian Leonard?
Ooh, another guy. We just mentioned all these names. Brian Leonard. I mean, that's going to be another interesting one. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's still 2 excellent weeks going now, and we will have Griff back on. I just didn't think we wanted Griff to have to, get in there and have people saying, "Oh, he's one of the players," that type of thing. But the great thing about Griff is he always gives you an honest opinion, and there's no beating around the bush with Griff.
Yeah, I tell you what, these big guys coming up are going to be a lot of fun to talk about, because I think there's a lot more parity in this group. You know what I mean? Like, who's the all-time block leader at Illinois? Who knows that one?
I don't know. Do you know top of your head, Brad?
I do. Nana Egwu.
Egwu, that's right.
Oh my gosh!
But in per game, it's Derek Holcomb. So if you're talking block shots, I mean, I don't know. It's pretty interesting to start thinking about this.
What would that year have been like without a knee injury for Derek?
Oh, I know.
You just don't know.
There's players that
we haven't. I don't think anybody's mentioned Mike Davis. I think he's got the most defensive rebounds. One of the best. Great rebounder, right? I mean,
Coleman
those teams are just they were just on bad teams, and I feel bad because there's so many of those guys that just got overlooked because you're over 700 something like that. You're right. When you walk in the oven basketball, his pitchers, and at least it used to be, because of his rebounding record.
And remember, Coleman Hawkins, we got another guy who's all around game there. I mean, there's a lot of good talent.
Roger Powell.
Yeah.
Oh, listen to some mad people. I hope they're not listening, and because there's no way we're gonna leave off some good people.
Like, we're gonna get killed. We are going to get killed at the next IlliniGuys function when all the basketball players show up.
Yeah,
I'm going to wear a Groucho. I'm going to wear a Groucho Marx thing and just walk around. Whenever certain players come up, we'll just put it on.
How about this one? How would you like to be a guy who's? So, do we end up with a guy top 10 in block shots, offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, and top 15 in points at center? Can you name him?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Hey, can you get the statistic again for us?
So he's I'll narrow it down. Top 3 in block shots, top 10 in defensive rebounds, top 6 in offensive rebounds, and top 15 in points scored in his career, I think it is, or top 20 maybe points. I can't remember.
Okay, I don't want to look super saying this, but I'm going to guess because we've not mentioned this name. Is it Kofi?
Nope, Mike Tisdale. Kofi's in all those too, but we haven't talked about Tisdale as a center.
That's
and
right.
He's another one on just he was not he's kind of a guy that was different, but he was really effective at times at certain things. It's wild.
Let me ask you guys this. Well, we just threw some names out there. Which position I think personally, I think the 5 is going to be the toughest spot. Which position do you think is going to be the hardest? So with that, we're going to leave off a lot of people.
I think power forward is going to be tough for me, with because you're going to have Cook and Augustine and Battle, Roger Powell. Holy cow! Coleman Hawkins,
Kenny Battle,
Battle. LaRon Black. How about LaRon?
Yeah,
Black?
That was a guy who, again.
He's an interesting player. No, and then you go to center. I mean, it was more of a late thing, but what about Arch? Robert Archibald was really good his last year at center.
Was Augustine the 5 on that team?
See, that's what. Augustine really was he played 4, or he played 5 that year. But remember, they played him a lot at the 4 too because they run Nick Smith and Jack Ingram in there.
Jack Ingram, I forgot. I was going to say.
And James still played a lot of 4. And then the next year, you remember they had was it the next year they had Sean Pruitt and he played some 5. James played 4 and 5, and so as time went on, James played 4 and 5. I think he's more of a power forward personally. He's really not a center, so I think I'd put him in that role. But he's the all-time. It's interesting, How about win shares? Like win shares. Augustine is so far ahead of everybody else in win shares. 26.2 win shares over his career, compared to the guys below him. And then you go down and D Brown is 17.2, and he played a lot of games.
Ooh.
Malcolm Hill, Kofi, Luther Head, Dimitri McCamey, Trent Frazier, Tisdale, Roger Powell. It's pretty wild.
Nathan just mentioned Robert Archibald, another one.
Arch, yep.
Oh.
And then we're Deion Thomas. Would you put Deion as a 5, 4?
I think he's a 5. I agree with Cook.
I think so.
He's a 5.
I agree. Marcus Griffin, 5.
Yeah,
So
Griff
that's
was a
a
5.
pretty
I
good
think Cook was a
Cook
4,
a
right?
4 or 5.
Kirk was a 4.
And I think Griff
Cook's a
was
4.
a 5.
Now this is before our time. It maybe we were alive, maybe, but we didn't see him. And you got guys like Dave Downey and Nick Weatherspoon were pretty good players too.
Yeah, good players
So
that I just don't
skip
remember.
the ream.
Yeah.
We can't do that. And so then
Yeah.
you go Ephraim Winters. What was Ephraim? Ephraim 4, 5. George Montgomery.
Oh, Big
So many really good dudes.
Nobody put a hurting on the rim like Big George shooting free throws in the last 2 minutes of the game.
Yep,
I
awesome.
love George, man, but you would be like, "Oh, George, come on, man." I remember my dad would be like, they should just give them 2 free throws if they get hacked all the time.
You know what's kind
That
of
was
cool?
his response.
Is seeing our fans interact with us. Some of these names that we forgot about. I mean, we I don't know if we mentioned Brian Notri on this before, but we mentioned Archibald and Robert Black. It's kind of cool seeing the fans interact because they're bringing up Herb Caldwell. I remember
Herb
him.
Caldwell. By the way, what's fun? We think about this. They got that. We talked a lot about that 2005 team. They've got their what is it? Their 30th reunion coming up here in a month. The opening football game. They're going to announce them at the football game. They're having their reception on the Saturday or whatever. So
there's a golf outing I heard about too.
What's that?
There's a golf outing I heard about.
Yeah, it's a blast, man. I think it'll be fun to have those guys back on campus. Should be good.
Yep. So next week we will be on with that. Now we may have other eye on the Illini stuff as we talk to different people. We're looking to kind of have a few more episodes here in the summertime. It gets a little bit, we kind of charge our batteries because we know once football season comes, then you run into basketball season and there's no breaks until April. But we definitely want to continue this. For those people who listen today, we really appreciate it. And of course, if you enjoy this type of discussion, it's worth getting an IlliniGuys.com membership, $99 a year. That type of those dollars really help us be able to afford the cost of getting out and covering the games. The new bigger Big Ten is not easier to cover when you have to get flights out to Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC, and then the constant whining for Brad to volunteer to be out in the California area and cover those games. He's always willing to take a bullet for the team.
Somebody has to be the guy.
He's willing to go to he's willing to go to LA in January and February through the kindness of his heart. And of course, this week, folks, for those geeks out there, Chuku Debe, another great one, coached by my father-in-law in junior high. But this week, of course, we are all we'll be talking next week about our Fantastic Four reviews because that opens up Thursday night. I will tell you, for me, in the last 25 years, it was seeing the first Lord of the Rings I was excited about because I read the books 20 times. Then seeing that Avengers was really fun. And now they better not ruin Galactus because if you're going to eat worlds, I cannot wait to see how they show him on film. You guys looking forward to Fantastic Four?
Can't wait.
I'm not the biggest fan of this cast. I heard you mention it last time.
I'm not particularly thrilled with their casting.
I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm going to see it because I have to, not just because it's podcast. Because I don't miss those type of movies. But the cast to me is I don't know. I need to give them a shot. But anyway, yeah.
So we've got that coming up. So there's a lot of things coming up this week, and then like I said, we want to get our power forwards, and of course, any of the folks who. As you're putting your comments, we don't mind if you rank yours 1 through 5 in the comments section while we're talking about it. We like to interact with the fans, but again, go to IlliniGuys.com. Go ahead and get a membership. The message boards are great because you can talk with Brad, Ked, Matt, Larry, myself, and thousands of other Illini fans across the world. It's a fantastic community. And we are looking forward to that. And we are also going to try to do some stuff, around some of the football games this year. We're working on something special for the Ohio State game. And we might even see if we can get something going for the USC game. Certainly joining. It's a lot of fun. And again, it helps us get that coverage because, man, it is not easy getting these tickets and all that stuff as the Big Ten gets bigger and bigger. So for Brad, for Ked, this is Mike Cagley. Thank you so much for listening tonight, and we will be back. But until then, go Illini.